Hey everyone, welcome back to Breakthrough Innovation, where we uncover what it really takes to lead change, create value, and build what's next. I'm JL Heather, here with my co host, Preston Chandler, and together we lead Centered, a firm that helps organizations navigate complexity, spark creativity, and unlock the full potential of their teams through innovation, coaching, and strategy. Today's conversation is about something everyone does: decisions. It's the ones that shape products, cultures, and outcomes long before strategy decks or roadmaps ever show up. Kylee Ingram is a storyteller, technologist, entrepreneur whose career has spanned international television, award winning interactive experiences, and now decision and intelligence. She began producing and directing sports and documentary projects distributed in over 100 countries before moving into participatory and interactive formats recognized at South by Southwest, Cannes, Content 360, and the Sports Technology Awards. That work sparked a deeper question for her. Why do groups sometimes make brilliant decisions and other times fail spectacularly, even when smart people are in the room? Today, as co founder and CEO of Wiser, Kylie helps organizations design better decision groups, surface hidden cognitive talent, and adapt communication to different decision styles in real time. Her work sits at the intersection of evidence based decision science, collective intelligence, and the messy reality of building things with people. Kylie, I was preparing for this interview, looking at the questions and everything, and I was getting excited because I think this is such a deep topic that everyone struggles with, even if they don't know it. So I'm really excited. Welcome to the
Great.
show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, both of you.
So you actually left what I would say is a pretty objectively successful career in international television. What actually pulled you towards the interactive work and eventually the decision science?
We'll talk to any producer right now about how hard it is out there, and they'll be like, it's hard. It's hard. TV is hard, but that's actually not why I think I like hard. But there are a few things that swayed me. Screen Australia at the time, which is our peak body here in Australia for film, were offering it wasn't grants, but they were investing in ideas that were interactive. And I got one of them up, and then, as you said, I got back to back nominations at Cannes, and I was like, oh, this is quite fun, like and it was quick. It was quicker than that, and I saw the difference between passive TV watching, and one of the first things I did was make an interactive project for kids. And, there were hundreds of thousands of kids using it, and you could see real change and real action, which really led me down that path. I really enjoyed it. There's no roadblocks in tech like there were in TV. Like, each channel has a few commissioning editors that, if they don't like what you're doing, you can't get it through.
Yeah.
Whereas with tech, sure, it's hard to raise money, especially as a woman, but at the same time, you can get a long way by yourself and prove. And also, that proof of concept was a lot quicker than TV. And then the final nail in the coffin was, opening of the coffin was, terrible analogy, was that I did this interactive thing called Crowd TV. And, in my quiet protest to these commissioning editors, we crowdsourced a program that went really well.
Oh, wow.
Channel 4 at the time in the UK was like, wow, this is amazing. And so my co-founder, he came to me, he'd done his research in wise crowds, and he said, hey, I've got this, I think you'd love it. So that's kind of how it began.
Mm.
I think one thing that resonates with me, and JL as well, I think, is that desire to have your work mean something and to see that you're having an impact. There's certainly been prospective clients that we've had that we've been like, you know what, we're not going to make much of an impact. There's not an opportunity to really change things, and but for me, that's what drives a lot of my passion, is being able to see the change in people's lives. And I love kind of seeing that in your eyes as well, of that desire to impact people's lives and to bring about change. It's very laudable.
I think it's inherent in documentary makers. I couldn't name one that doesn't, doesn't want to have an impact or doesn't care about, to get a story up and see it through is the hardest thing. And then once you've got it up, then you've got to keep going. And they even have what they call impact producers now. You
Mm,
go and see the producers of Virunga that are trying to save the gorillas, and now they've got to raise another million so they can do the impact, so they can, or the fishing out of Europe was changed by people changed, or the killing of dolphins in Japan. These
yeah,
documentary makers, you've got to live and breathe. Like, this could take 10 years out of their lives
right.
once they've finished one documentary. It's pretty profound, the effort these people put in. It's incredible.
Well, and I think when you have that level of effort, it really highlights the importance of being able to make good decisions. And I think humanity has this problem when it comes to decisions. We judge the quality of the decision based on the outcome, not actually what we knew at the time and how well we actually tried to decide.
Agreed. Agreed.
I think we have this perspective that if we just had the right people in the room, the smart people in the room with a really good leader, like, we're going to always make good decisions. But that's not always true. Like, I've seen some really smart teams still make horrible decisions, and they had the data, they had leaders, all this other stuff. I'm curious, like, why is decision making so hard? What keeps people going back to the bad decisions, and how can they do better?
Yeah, so in this little bit before I start on that is I'll add that not only did I have the research of my co-founder that did Wise Crowds, we met this amazing woman called Dr. Juliet Burke, who was at Deloitte and ran her own division there. And she wrote a book, Which Two Heads Are Better Than One, about decision frameworking. And looking at her research, she found if you had the right people in the room, which we'll get to, and, an inclusive leader that was going to allow them to be that, you reduce decision error by 30% and increase innovation by 20%. So we've built Wiser to address, if we're looking at the heart of it, we're trying to improve decisions. But in reflection of what that actually means, it's how do we get out of our own way? And in Juliet's research, it's all about bias. You know what I mean? So she named
Yeah.
3 biases: social bias, information bias, and capacity bias, which are the main things stopping people from making good decisions.
So maybe give us a little detail
Yeah.
about each one of
Yeah.
those,
Well,
because
I
now
didn't
you've
know
piqued
whether
my
you wanted
interest.
to. Yes, no, I didn't know how deep you wanted to go, but we're ready. All right. So social bias is about who gets listened to and who does not. So certain voices dominate. There's that research, the person that speaks the most
Yeah.
is thought of as the leader. So there's always that, and others get sidelined. So that leads to groupthink, and decisions reflect a narrow set of perspectives. Then we got information bias: what information is valued, what is ignored. And teams often overweight the data that confirms their views and underweight unfamiliar sources. And that's the bit that creates the blind spots and poor evidence use. And then you've got capacity bias. So, how much complexity can they handle? And this is a big one for today's age. People are like, oh my gosh, the load is so high. Individuals try and then oversimplify and default to the familiar again. And so that is what is pushing down creativity and the quality of outcomes. And then I think there's a third one that Juliet wasn't talking, or a fourth one that Juliet wasn't talking about at the time. Our world is made up. These most successful companies are conflict entrepreneurs. They're designed to polarize. We're so used to being
Mhm.
polarized these days. And, the way we talk to one another online, and organizations can feel the downstream effects of this. Fractured teams perform, it leads to how they perform together. And if you want a healthy decision system, you need the opposite design to that. So you have to stop people coming into the workplace the way they are on social media and out on the internet. You need to de-silo people and understand you might need to pull people across silos to get the best outcome. And that doesn't mean restructure. That means just understanding the quality of talent you have within your walls.
I think some of
And
those numbers are just really interesting. I mean, getting the right people and having a safer space, or somebody who's willing to be inclusive of all the voices. That it seems like a really simple, straightforward thing to do. with a significant impact. And then I think just even in educating people, like you just educated us on here's the couple of biases, that might be worth kicking off a meeting and saying, here are a couple of biases that we're going to just watch for today. And I bet even that would have an impact.
Without a doubt. And the next part of Juliet's research was she went into what's the cognitive diversity of the decision making. And she found there were 6 different ways people come at decisions, basically, from outcomes, evidence, people, options. And she had not codified that work. So we took that away and took a couple of years to make decision profiles. So we've got 7 because we found with adding a bit of personality, there's a very open person that slides a little bit more than others. So we have those 7 decision profiles. And she talks about a board like Enron, right? It might have tried having that, it might have looked a little bit diverse. It had a woman on it, which was a bit wild at the time. It had a, man that, anyway, the thing was, if you analyze them, they were all almost the same cognitive thinkers. And she found in Western society, 75% of CEOs are one of 2 types: their outcomes or
Wow.
their options. And what you get is what we call cognitive drift. So you've got these people at the top, and at the bottom of the pyramid, maybe in an early team or an early when you first come into the company, you've got a lot of that diversity. These people, we like working with the same kind of people.
Right.
We start picking. By the time middle management happens, most companies, it's a silent thing that happens. Companies don't even know they're doing it. And they're putting, by middle management, these people are reflecting, these people down here have either, shut up, or they've gone, they've realized they've got to think, try and think like that. You can't, long story about that too. You can pretend to think like that. You could even ask AI, what if we didn't have this? But it can't, literally can't argue that side of it. It can't keep seeing
Yeah.
deeper and deeper and deeper, which is what you need in the room. And so understanding that part is really interesting. I just did we've got another tool that maps decision profiles to communication. So you can
Mm.
generate a decision profile about a third party. Not as accurate as the full thing, but I just did it for we had a problem down here with a film, a writers festival where the board removed a writer and everybody else left. The whole board got sacked. The event got moved. And when I looked at those, I profiled the 9, I think there were board members, and I thought our tech had broken because they all came out with a risk assessment. And this is strange. 8 out of 9 came out primary and secondary for risk focus, and 5 out of 9 definitely had a primary. Now, people of risk, which we call guardians, are the usually the least prevalent profile. So to have them all, so they're selecting one another. And then what happened is you'd think, oh, they'll be really good at risk. They weren't. They focused on the wrong risk. And they didn't have
Yeah.
an explorer there. They didn't have a visionary there. They didn't have the others there to go, hey, if this happens and this could happen. They all drilled into this one problem, and it was a problem, and it completely backfired on them. And
Mm.
that's rare to see. That was really so, and I've analyzed a lot of boards now, and you often end up with just 2 or 3 of the types rather than the 7.
Well, it's interesting. I think, like in the US at least, I won't speak for the world, although I feel like it is a more global problem.
Have at it.
The word diversity has been polarized, or it's become a very polarizing word. And I think people think about diversity in the workplace on teams and they think it's purely color of skin. And I think what you're saying matches something that I believe is it's about lived experience. I think monochromatic teams, for lack of a better term, is maybe a sign that maybe you need to look at your diversity, but it's not necessarily a sign that your diversity is a problem. The real problem is when you have everyone who's coming at a problem from the same background, the same context, because that means there's blinders on the whole team. how do you, like, if you're a leader, how do you detect that? And what's even the first step to helping people break out of that? Do you have to get rid of someone to make room for someone new? Like, what do you do?
I probably need to take a step back to answer some of the ways that the other diversity is still relevant. And yes,
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
let whoever is triggered by the word diversity, just let it wash over you so we can get to the science and not
Yeah,
worry about the word.
absolutely.
Um, the other diversity still matters. So with Wiser, we have
Yes.
decision profiles. Then what the other thing you can do is you can type in what question or decision you want to make, and our system tells you, gives you red light, green light. Do you have a good wise crowd? And the things it's looking for 3 things. So it's putting a data scientist in your room. It's looking for outward facing diversity. And the main things around decisions with outward facing diversity is age, gender, and ethnicity, which I'll come back to in a second. Then the most important thing is experience. So Boeing taking engineers out of the room when they're making decisions about planes is not a good idea. So the Wiser goes, no, it doesn't have any sound effects. Probably should, but it says no. Like you need an engineer for this decision. So it's looking at all that. So if we look at that outward facing diversity, which you were just referring to, there's really great things about jury studies, right? And that was out of the US. And if you put a person of color in the room, it's not just the experience. If you have a whole lot of white people in the room, they check themselves for a
Yeah.
second. And they go, it doesn't take longer to make a decision, but the decision is better because they realize they're checking themselves and going, oh, wow, there's a different perspective here, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And the same thing for gender. Gender isn't a defining factor because women can think exactly the same way as men. Margaret Thatcher, like, no, I just making jokes here, but like they can think the exact same way. It's not that. But if you get a room full of one or the other, there's kind of a wolf pack thing that starts to happen. A
Mm,
room full of men or a room full of women, it skews. So you don't really want either. You want a good mix of the genders as well. I mean, there's other things in there, but that's
sure.
the quickest way of saying it. So with, there's science behind who can be in the room and understanding, 90% of our clients start with what we call decision profile mapping, just understanding who you have and even drilling down into the teams and groups. And then we've got, the questions, the panels you might have. Like, do you understand who's in the room? And we have the last part of the technology is a recommendation engine. You don't have the engineer in the room. It will recommend who might round out this team for you. 40 to 60% of those people we're seeing in that recommendation have never been invited into the decision room before.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it makes sense to me because I think, when we talk about lived experiences, like just taking gender, it is impossible for me to understand completely, at least, or even sufficiently in any way, the lived experience of my daughter or my wife. And I would totally agree. And I do want to backtrack a little bit. I'm a firm believer that, like, every combination of the word diversity is probably good when it comes to decisions, because I can totally see how just what you're seeing changes the way you think, let alone what people are saying. So I love that. I think maybe the important thing for me is when people recognize after this conversation, they go back to the room to make the decision, they look around and they're like, oh crap, I probably don't have the diversity I need in any way in this room. How do they start moving in the right direction? Like, what would you recommend for them to do tomorrow to take a step in the right direction to fix the problem?
Well, obviously, they should do their decision profiles with us and map
Obvi-
their people.
Absolutely.
And then they're set. Yeah. I mean, I think it would be, if you could sit down and ask how you think you come at decisions, and that we've got a blog, a little blog on that, how you could try and work out how each of you is coming at decisions and ask that questions. Go through, as Preston was saying, go through those biases and talk about them. The other
Mm,
problem we see is often it's less than 3% of an organization is making decisions. So the people that, you can imagine the people that need our tech most want us least. And because they know, but I've had some really interesting conversations with a few CEOs that are like that. And the way I get around that is, well, how do you delegate with certainty? Who's in the room that's bringing the decision to you? And same with the board. And that transparency that they can see when they see who was in the room and that makeup of the decision, that decision intelligence, that must, I mean, even with the communication tool we use, there's only 7 of them. If you can get that
Yeah.
balance right, even when you're sending out an email, understanding how somebody is receiving that communication is a huge point of difference.
Yeah, it's
No, I
great.
love that. And I apologize. We are going to have to wrap up because we're at time. But I love this conversation. I think the way we make decisions so often is, I don't want to say a problem, but it is problematic. Maybe that's slightly
Well,
different.
it's gut. People are using their guts. Like they're
Yeah,
just like, and I know they're using their guts with an unscientific amount of confidence.
that is very true. That is very, and we hardly ever think or analyze how we decide. And I think that's a big thing is if more people spent the time to really just ask the question, like, how are we making this decision? It would go a long ways. But Kylie, thank you so much for the time. I think this was a really great conversation. If people do want to work with Wiser or connect with you, what's the best way for them to get into contact?
Well, the individuals can go to our website and take their decision profile. It's free. And we are big on privacy. We're a big privacy company. So we are wiser, WIZER .business. And then I'm on LinkedIn. So say hi. And my
Awesome. I
phone
love
number
it.
is just kidding. I don't know.
No. I love
Thank
it.
you.
That's great. Thank you so much. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Uh, for everyone else who's made it all the way to the end of the episode, I'd love to hear from you. What is your biggest roadblock, your biggest hurdle in making good decisions, to feeling confident in your decisions, not in a superficial way, but in a real way? Curious. And if you know anyone who struggles with decisions or any people that need to make better decisions than they're making right now, think about sharing this episode with them, introduce Kylie to them so they can hear a little bit about what Wiser does. And then while you're down there leaving the comment, don't forget to leave that 5-star review as well. So, Kylie, thanks again. For everyone else, we'll see you next time on Breakthrough Innovation.
Bye.